Well, guys and gals, after all these years, we finally have something new with Edge of Sleep. I'm going to be discussing the podcast, the book, and the show for right now, so obviously there's going to be spoilers, and that's your only warning. So on September 30th, Markiplier dropped this video, The Plan, and in this video he mentions that The Edge of Sleep is going to be released October 18th. The show, that is. And I was reminded of that today when I saw Q-Code's post. The moment you've all been waiting for, The Edge of Sleep is coming back on October 18th. Markiplier's hit podcast comes to a whole new life with visual artistry. Edge of Sleep will be available on Prime Video on the 18th. So I thought, okay, well, little did I know that, in fact, it was released today, the 15th. And I only discovered that it was released today because Edge of Sleep Twitter was blowing up, and that, you know, in the US it was available for some reason 3 days early. Not that I'm complaining, but it's, you know, it's there. And I thought, oh my god, I have to put everything on hold so I can watch it. So I'm going to talk about that now. So the show itself, I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was awesome. I absolutely loved the show. Like I said, I just binge watched all of them. But I was a little confused at the show because it was only 6 episodes, as opposed to the 8 episodes that were in the podcast. And we can even look at it here. See, there are 6 episodes here. 20 minutes, 21, 21, 22, 22, 25. I thought, well, that is highly peculiar, because all the podcast episodes are much longer than those, and there are more episodes. See, if we look at the Edge of Sleep podcast full series, we have 1 through 8 here at 22 minutes, 25, 28, 27, 34, 22, 22, 31. So I thought, ooh, we're going to have some issues here. You know, they had to shorten it up, which, you know, makes sense. You know, it's live action, that kind of stuff. It's always going to be different, but, like, you know, whatever. What I forgot is that a long time ago, there was a book released. I completely forgot about the book. I didn't read the book. I just remember it being announced, and I didn't discover until after I watched the show that it took the book's ending and not the podcast's ending. So a little bit about this is that the book and the podcast have 2 separate endings. Like, some different things happen. Some different sequencing things happen, and they have different endings and different outcomes, which I thought was peculiar. Well, I mean, A, because, you know, like, why would you change the endings? But B, I don't know. I didn't read the books. I can't really talk that much on it. I was just confused, and I haven't read the book, so I don't know if it's better. I don't know if it's worse. People seem to love it, but I can't speak for it myself because I haven't read it. But some of the main points that I wanted to hit on, in regards to the show itself, like I said, I thought it was awesome. The visuals were awesome. They had a track, I Go to Sleep, for the intros. It was awesome. It worked perfectly. It was beautifully done. But there are some discrepancies, and then again, this is coming from a guy that has just listened to the podcast. I have not read the book, so it could make sense to everybody who has read the book, but it didn't make sense to me, someone who just listened to the podcast. So Mateo, Dave's friend, the other night worker, he was a bit of a stubborn dick in the show. Like I said, I don't know if that's an adaptation that came from the book more so than the podcast, but I remember him being significantly less of a dick in the podcast. He was just kind of stubborn, got really hot-headed really easily, and I don't know. I like the podcast Mateo better. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is that so in the podcast, there was a guy who was very prevalent. He was the guy with the blacked out van. I don't remember what his name was, but we're talking about the guy that tried to cut Mark's character, tried to cut his balls off, tried to kidnap Katie. He was a bit of a predator in a blacked out van is what he was. And yeah, we never saw him. His character was replaced by a sweet old woman who was left over in the hospital. Now, if you may remember, originally in the podcast, there were no survivors in the hospital. But in this, there was a survivor in the hospital, some older woman who has a connection to Katie. I don't really know what their dynamic was, but I'm assuming it came from the book, obviously. And she ended up being the one that agrees to go into the big scanner. I think it was an MRI machine. I don't know anything about medical equipment, but she agreed to let Linda scan her brain as she was falling asleep to figure out what was happening. And basically they got the intel they needed from this woman that they would have gotten from the Predator guy, as seen in the podcast, except for, she was a sweet old woman as opposed to the other guy who was just a literal predator who they just decided to kill so they could survive. And the woman volunteered to die for their cause. And another thing that I want to touch on is the fact that when Dave goes to sleep in the hospital he's going to go to sleep, see what he can, and then they're going to wake him back up. When he goes to sleep and he wakes back up, he's like, we got to get to the Pacific Island. We got to get to the Pacific Island. And in the podcast, the people with the triangles in their eyes, the elephant people, the elephant people, I guess that's what to call them, because the elephant would try to stop them from getting there or whatever. They did not appear until after they were safe on the Pacific Island. Like, they had no issues getting from the hospital to the airport, which I thought was odd because that was like a really intense scene, them trying to get from the hospital to the airport. I remember from the podcast. I remember that being very intense. And I don't know. I wasn't expecting to not see that. I was expecting to see that. And like I said, the people with the triangles in their eyes, the zombies, I guess, they didn't start waking up until after Dave, Linda, and Mateo were safe. And Mateo survives. In the podcast, I remember him dying at the plane crash. And it was just Linda and Dave that made it to the people there. The Dream Warriors. I don't remember exactly what they're called. I'm terrible with names. And another thing was that Katie died on the plane. And now she's a person with the triangles in her eyes, but she's now a zombie in the ocean. And she's looking in on them at the island. I don't know. I thought that was really peculiar. And then, like I said, like everybody starts, like there's a visual at the end where like everybody starts waking up at the end. All the people that they passed when they were still in California. I think they were in California. But it was like after they had already gotten there. It's like, well, that's really odd. And yeah, again, I think that was just taking after the book more so than the podcast. I was just a podcast listener. I never read the book because honestly, I forgot about it. I remember when it got released, it was a big deal, and I kind of wanted to get one, but I just didn't really think about it. And there were also more people than just Dave. There were more people that were guided to the island than just Dave. There were a lot more people there, which I thought that was kind of odd too, but whatever. And then the last point I want to make is that there weren't as many violent graphic flashbacks to Dave's childhood, because Dave, he in the podcast, it talks about how he's like scarred all over. He always was cutting himself because of his dreams and the moobles and all that, like underneath his skin, like cut your skin, Dave. And like he would have to like cut out his skin and stuff. That we never got any of that. And we even got a flash to when Mark was with Katie and he cut a triangle in his chest. And when he cut to that, he didn't have the scars like he did as described in the podcast. I thought that was kind of odd too, but because the only scar he had was the triangle that he put on himself when he was an adult already with Katie. So like he still had the childhood nightmares. We did get flashbacks to that. He still had the nightmares for sure, but they weren't as emphasized and they weren't as graphic as in the podcast. Now, obviously there's going to be a lot of differences when it comes to from putting something that was in writing and putting it on a screen. Obviously there's going to be a lot of differences there. I'm not trying to trash the show at all. I was just pointing out my little confusions, my little disconnects that I had. But the show did feel rushed. I will say that the show did feel pretty rushed, especially when the podcast was originally like 20 to 30, sometimes over 30 minutes a piece for 8 episodes, down to roughly 20 minutes a piece for 6 episodes. I mean, obviously you're gonna have to rush it, but still, I don't know. I feel like it wasn't as fleshed out, and it was. They could get to point A from point to point B really easily. There weren't as many hardships, I feel like. The atmosphere was there, don't get me wrong. I was sitting on the edge of my seat. Not the edge of my sleep. I was sitting on the edge of my seat. That was actually not on purpose. That was actually not on purpose. I actually just said that. I was sitting on the edge of my seat for a lot of it. The atmosphere was there. It just felt a little rushed. It was very convenient for them. They had a lot of plot armor. I feel like it just wasn't as hard for them. But I know it was. Like, you know what I mean? I don't really know how to articulate how I think about that. But as a whole, I think it was really good. The atmosphere was there. I think it takes after the book far more than the podcast. I can't attest to that myself. Again, I didn't read the book, so I don't know. If you read the book, let me know anything. Let me know if it was a good adaptation. Let me know if it was a bad adaptation. Whatever. I don't care. I just want to know, and I might even read the book myself after watching this so I can get caught up here. But yeah, all in all, I really loved it. I really did. I really loved watching that. And I would recommend it. Now all we have to do is wait for season 2. We've been waiting for season 2 for a very long time. And I mean, hey, we finally got the live action, but now we just need season 2. But yeah, no, I'm not complaining at all. I'm just happy we got this. Like I said, it was not a waste of time. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Let's turn the comment section of this video into a big discussion about The Edge of Sleep. So don't look at the comments or else there might be spoilers. But yeah, thank you so much for watching my little breakdown of what I thought about it. Again, I loved it. I cannot emphasize that enough. I have my critiques, but that's mainly because I think I just didn't read the book. I absolutely loved it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and yeah, maybe I'll meet you in the comments. Goodbye.